This is going to be your guide to using Kleavor in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Finally, a Pokemon with workable stats. 135 on the attack is pretty good. 85 speed means we're actually in like a pretty common tier here. Because I was looking at these like more powerful offensive Pokemon. Yeah, Excalibur hanging around 87 speed, Haxorus sub 100, Dragonite actually on that 80 with less attack, so that's kind of weird. Less bulk. We also don't have like the shenanigans of multiscale, but kind of showing what we're working with on a pretty good attack. But then Pokemon like Salamence don't see play with 135 attack and even 100 on the base speed, access to the Dragon Dance. So it's kind of weird when you get into this, but at least it's viable. At least those are Pokemon you have heard of and at least seen a couple of times in battle. And that's also where we get into some weird Pokemon damage philosophy, because the game skews physical. It's why we have Intimidate, but we don't have an Intimidate for special attackers. Also, there's generally going to be higher attack stats and higher defense stats than special attack and special defense. So what this means is like special attacking Pokemon are actually going to be more potent around 130 than we see with like physical attacking Pokemon. However, there's other things that go into play, so let's break it down. Like the Sharpness ability. It's so broken to just get 50% damage, and on the Pokemon it goes on, they generally have a lot of slicing and cutting moves, so it's just free 50% damage, whereas we used to look at sheer force as something insane, like, wow, yeah, I don't care if my move doesn't have a 10% chance to do an effect anymore for a free Life Orb that also negates Life Orb burn? Amazing. And it also effectively invalidates Sheer Force and Swarm, which can also be a really good ability if you kind of like play on that edge and you work around it and you get those free stats. Or you just go Sharpness, Stone Axe, that's a signature move, and then you can go X-Scissor, which also works with Sharpness. And now you just have everything for free on a 135 attack Pokemon, and we haven't even gotten into an item or terastallization yet. Okay, signature move. This is where things get weird. So, Stone Axe, 65 power, 90% accuracy, sets Stealth Rock on target side. Now what's really weird is Samurott has the same thing for Spikes. 65 base power, 90% accuracy, Sharpness as an ability. It's so annoying because Scrappy and a lot of other abilities don't get enough like play or usage on viable Pokemon, and then Game Freak for Generation 9 went, yeah, let's just give a busted ability to 4 Pokemon. And not really expanding on like ability usage outside of that. Also, Samurott 108 on the attack, which makes it harder to use compared to the Kleavor, and the same 85 speed. So even in the realm of Hisuian Pokemon, we just have like straight crazy power creep. And I talked about it in the Samurott guide with Glimmora that Toxic Spikes is so useless that having an ability that gives you Toxic Spikes for free doesn't matter. Toxic Spikes will still have no impact in like 99% of Pokemon battles. It's crazy. Stealth Rocks at least affects every Pokemon, but the Church of Verlisify is that entry hazards are bad. But in this case, it's like, well, we're just using a move that's better than anything we have access to, because Rock is terrible. We have Rock Blast, which I mean, like, you kind of cheese it into decent base power, but it's still not crazy reliable. Rock Slide is just low base power, useless for damage, and then Stone Edge has the inaccuracy. So like, what do you do as a rock type Pokemon? It's very bad move access, and then Sharpness is just going to make it like the most powerful good rock type move that also sets Stealth Rocks. All right, that's viable because like it's forced into being viable. You need all of that. You need a typing that doesn't have any better access. You need an ability that gives you 50% damage for free on top of Stab to make Stealth Rocks maybe alright. We also have the Bug Rock typing, and that's pretty good. You think Bug and Rock together, and that's going to be like one of those magical Pokemon that has 7 weaknesses and is completely unusable? No. Rock, Steel, Water. 3 weaknesses, not great, is manageable. Again, we talked about how Rock is terrible, and you don't really see it too often. So it's mostly just going to be Steel and Water threat. Yeah, again, that's manageable, and we can like Terastallize into Bug, which again is a surprisingly good defensive type. Now, it is better if you like pivot off of something that's like weak to ground or fighting into Bug, not going from like Rock Bug to Bug. But some of those things where it's like, oh yeah, you're not completely ruining your typing if you want to kind of get access to something, like if you're going Grass or Ice, which is not really a viable Terra option. Now that's a long setup just to kind of explain what Kleavor is, but we need to do it to understand what Kleavor does. So yeah, we just kind of want to play into that Sharpness, and that's where it also kind of gets awkward, because Focus Sash, it's free, it's obvious, you get your guaranteed agility, 70-70, yeah, you're gonna get blown up by special attacks. Even 70-95 is a perfectly achievable neutral KO range for a lot of offensive Pokemon, so you're going to get hit. And then a super effective hit, yeah, there's no chance you survive one of those. So like Agility, Focus Sash, if they don't have priority, well now you crush things, right? Let's look at the damage calculations. So doubling our speed gives us a lot of interesting interactions. Adamant Nature is 274 speed, which means Iron Bundle gets outsped with a lot to spare. So if you're going like +2 on an 85 speed Pokemon, now you're like creeping into Scarf ranges on other Pokemon and like +1s and stuff. That's where like the speed tiers get nonsense, and you generally don't see that as much in Generation 9. So you're just kind of covering for everything, which means maybe you cut off some of the stats and then like try to get a little bit of bulk in, but that doesn't make sense if you're going Focus Sash. So you can go like more bulky and find a different item that you want to use, or yeah, you just make sure you're now the fastest Pokemon in the 0 priority bracket, and you wreck. So we have Adamant Nature, Sharpness, Exos are 130, wait, what? Okay, so here's another weird thing. Since the Pokemon Home update hasn't happened and all the Hisuian Pokemon haven't come out, the stats are kind of weird, because we saw this with Hisuian Zoroark, that when it launched it actually had like different stats that were better. So I'm thinking like this is the initial data mine of the game, and then like in the recent updates of Pokemon, it's actually updated to the true values. So I'm wanting to say like this is going to be the release, and it's all like updated and cleaned up after Hisuian Zoroark in Pokemon Showdown has it, I hope. And then we can just kind of like tweak around as needed. So it has like 5 more attack and 5 less special defense, which is just a straight buff and has no impact on the Pokemon's performance whatsoever. So it's like, okay, if there's that and Pokemon Showdown is accurate, we should be good releasing these guides early, and we can see the damage. It's not a KO on something like the Iron Bundle. Again, we're like trying to like find these outspeeds and stuff. Terra Bug then makes it a KO, because we're just putting so much damage into it. So that's what you need to do. You just go Terra Bug, and then you use Sharpness, and then you wreck everything, especially if nothing can touch you, depending on the speed bracket. And if you're going up against a setup Pokemon, you just get the free agility, and then you can like coverage out or do things against it. Like there's combos here to where if you don't have the KO, you go Stone Axe, then Exozor, and now you just have the free Stealth Rocks to then help into your damage calculations more. Night Slash is going to help cover for some well, not vulnerabilities, but just some resistances inside of Bug. And it is kind of weird, like, how in-depth we can go on Kleavor with this moveset breakdown, where it's like, who's going to use Kleavor? Like, I mean, I guess it's going to be good, but it doesn't seem as blatantly broken as a lot of Pokemon introduced in, not even just Generation 9, a lot of recent generations. Like, you look at Talk Specs and you go, oh, that's just the filthiest thing ever. And it takes, that's it. You go Stockpile, anyone that doesn't go Stockpile is just trash the game, and then you've effectively broken that Pokemon for no work. With Kleavor, if you go into the deep dive, you can kind of, like, unwrap it and figure out like all these actual interactions and then optimizing it into an S tier Pokemon, because it might be that. So Bug, resisted by a lot, and that's just kind of like the offensive typings and interactions with Bug. Weird typing where you don't like realize how much resists it until you're in that position, but when you're in that position you realize Bug is bad, so you never use it offensively, and then you forget how much resists Bug. So you do need to build around that. And I don't think like you even want to go Terra into something else. You just want to make it to where if I'm hitting something neutral with Kleavor, which is kind of a decent amount of the meta, you just win the game. And then we can like add in some of the other things, Bug, Dark Rock. Looking better. We're still resisted by a few things. This is not going to be like all the not all of these Pokemon are in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but it's not good when like Iron Valiant, Iron Hands, Great Tusk, Tinkaton just come in and resist us. So like fairy type Pokemon with an extra typing on top of that make it kind of tricky to just function. I also didn't really think it was possible to have a moveset where mono fighting just resists us. Now there's not a lot of that, but still it's not ideal. And then if we go back into Kleavor's moveset, it's like, alright, let's get rid of Night Slash for something. I guess at that point you just go close combat because you're at 1 hit points and you're super outspeeding everything. so this doesn't really matter. And that might be better, but then Ghost-type Pokemon can still be very problematic. Like, you want the Night Slash because you're going to see 7 Golden Go before you see, like, 1 Fighting-type Pokemon that can give you a problem. There's also, like, some interesting things like Focus Sash Thief, but you just never see that actually applied in a Pokemon game, and it's even worse on Kleavor because you get less base power, and you also lose the 50% on Sharpness, so you just run this and hope the threats are not meta, or like the resists are not meta. Now I wanted to take a look at a few more damage calculations because with our speed, with Sharpness, we are a wall-breaking Pokemon, so we need to see what happens against a 252 just fat tank of a Pokemon, and two-shotting it is where you want to be because you're outspeeding a max hit points, max defense invested Pokemon pretty much every time, even with like uninvested speed or low weird invested speed, even though we're probably still going to be running the same set. If you go like Choice Band, then wall breaking, it also gets kind of crazy. It's still not a KO, so that's also kind of like the give and take. I'm like, does Choice Band give you any extra ranges? Actually, kind of, if it's like a max hit points, max attack Pokemon that doesn't have full defense investment. So actually showing a pretty competent wall-breaking Pokemon. If you just go max attack, max speed, there's some things that can get weird where it's like, oh, Skeledirge just hit you with a Will-O-Wisp and then you drop off your damage and maybe you like lose some of the KO ranges. But even then, like, this is really, really nice to look at. And then you have the bonus effect of a Stone Axe on top of 2-hit KOing just some of the tankier Pokemon. You can still X-Scissor other tanky Pokemon. Now we can also see the limitations of our coverage and also damage ranges that we have Baxcalibur, a pseudo-legendary Pokemon, 115 hit points, 92 defense, uninvested. Actually, we want to go level 50 because damage calculations are slightly more skewed offensive there, so we get a bit more damage to show. But even then, it's like, yeah, uninvested this doesn't get neutrally KO'd by Bug X-Scissor. That's not ideal. And if we don't have a super effective hit on a similar kind of Pokemon, well, hopefully we just don't get KO'd. But then, that's where the benefit of our moveset can come into play, that if we set Stealth Rocks while using Stone Axe on like some kind of revenge scenario, we can actually start finding some ranges where X-Scissor Stealth Rock damage calculations matter. Now that is effectively the crux of Smogon, but in no way is it an argument against me where it's like, you can't say that entry hazards are bad when it's working for your moveset right there, that the plus Stealth Rock's damage calculations are valid. Now the problem with entry hazards and Stealth Rock damage calculations that the trash players at Smogon can't understand is that it's not a neutral game state. You have to give up a turn to make it happen, so you can't just automatically factor it in to, oh, this Pokemon's busted because of that. And even then, in most damage calculations, the Stealth Rocks aren't really going to matter. So you're effectively just handing your opponent a free turn for something that might amount to an 80 base power move spread out over multiple Pokemon over the course of a battle. And if it's like a more bulky meta where Pokemon have recovery, Stealth Rocks just doesn't matter at all. So really, the only way Stealth Rocks can be viable is if it's on a pretty good Pokemon, and it happens for free as the secondary effect of one of the strongest moves in the bracket. Wait, I already said that earlier in this video, and that just further proves it. But what else can Kleavor do? Because in looking at Sharpness, just to make sure I'm not like forgetting an obvious move or something, Fury Cutter. It's affected by Sharpness. Fury Cutter is actually a dangerously broken move, especially in Generation 9, where it's a slower meta game, where if a bulky Pokemon can stack it and start one-shotting and not really be too threatened, and that comes online faster because of the Sharpness, we might be onto something. So when I'm talking about a wall-breaking Kleavor where you're running Choice Band, you just need Fury Cutter, because on your max damage usage, you're at a 160 base power that's getting Sharpness, 50%, Choice Band, which is an effective 2.25 damage modifier, and then Terra Bug. It's unreal amounts of damage and base power to where things that resist you still get mollywopped. Alright boys, who wants to see how Pokemon damage calculation spaghetti works with low base power moves and terastallization? If we click on Sharpness here, we can see it affects the Fury Cutter, but not the Bug Bite. But then, if we go Terra Bug, they end up at the same amount of damage. Now, this is a quirk with terastallization to where low base power moves actually reach a floor. It seems to be 60 base power, but that also kind of overrides other things going on. So because Fury Cutter is initially going to 60 with Sharpness, going into the Terra means like you hit that 60, so you're not finding the other boost. But if we go 80 on each of these, we can then see the damage numbers change, because this is going from 60 to 120, this is going from 60 to 80, because now it's 80, now it's not hitting that floor anymore, so it's becoming a regular move. That's just kind of some weird stuff, but we can look at the damage calculation into a Dondozo. Max hit points, max defense, defensive nature, one of the fattest Pokemon out there. Let's also drop this back down to 40. Let's also show some other comparison and see how the matchup plays out. So a really good thing about Fury Cutter is that it's not an attack buff, so it bypasses the Unaware, which is big into the Dondozo. So it also kind of shows like our first Fury Cutter is going to be pretty buffed, but then damage is going to level out. So it depends on like when we find those KO ranges. So initially goes into 40, then we slam the 80, and like Dondozo is feeling it, and we can just like scale on the Dondozo and just win. And now we just have too much damage and resistances don't matter. So like the ideal scenario is that a tank Pokemon or a slower Pokemon than you gets in your way, and then you go Fury Cutter, take the hit, Fury Cutter, and then like now you're just at max damage against theoretically the rest of their team, depending on like how the matchup goes and what sweeping Pokemon they have. But also, because 135 attack is so high, EVs, it makes a difference, but like if you're doing that much damage, like you're one-shotting Dondozo on 100 attack EVs, which means you can actually split some bulk, and that opens up potential on the moveset. Now this also opens up some weird stuff going on with the game. So what happens if we're Adamant +1? We get outsped by Iron Bundle by 1. So we actually want the Jolly Nature +1. If we can find like an easy and free +1, then this might actually mean something. It also means we might have some like EV weirdness to play around with, and then it makes me wonder like, has anything this audacious ever been done in Pokemon before? We actually have like 200 attack and 200 speed, and then the rest goes into hit points for some kind of like really wacky moveset. So that's kind of like what I'm trying to build up here. Let's also make sure we can get the optimization at level 50. I don't remember what that breakpoint is. 204. It's like, what happens if you go 204, 204, 96, and they just like find a little bit of extra durability for free, as well as crazy speed tiers? So Trailblaze giving us damaging +1 actually opens up a lot of play on the Kleavor and a lot of like weird stuff you can do. So at the 204, this with a +1 outspeeds Dragapult. So that's kind of nice to have. Maybe you creep that because some things are trying to creep the Dragapult. Would be cool to just outspeed and one-shot everything. And then that means you maybe open up some hit points. So you can do something like this. Maybe you drop on the damage because Jolly Nature instead of Adamant is a bit more significant. But you can find like extra durability somewhere. I mean like 3 hit points. Will that ever matter? Maybe not. Does the speed ever matter? Maybe. I don't know. Do something. Again, that's where you just kind of fall to like 204, 204, 92 again. If you're getting outsped by weird things, like weird +1s, if you are not surviving, then like you can tweak as needed. Like I need more damage. I actually have enough damage. I need more survivability. You have options. You can develop this depending on the meta, and it gets pretty interesting. So then like Trailblaze, Fury Cutter with the Lychee Berry, you just kind of open that up, and if you get snowballing, it's kind of over. And if the opponent just has like slow Pokemon left, get the Stone Axe down for that extra little bit of damage. It's going to help into your Fury Cutter stacking. And that's what I mean. This has options. This has options to Wall Break and Sweep. And this could be the S-tier moveset for Kleavor that has like the highest effectiveness against every opposing team composition. Or maybe you just want to have a Wall Breaker. Like if you just need a Wall Breaker on your team, use the other slots to just dedicate beating anything faster than 85 speed. And then you just come in and clean up like their 3 disgustingly tanky Pokemon with Choice Band Fury Cutter. Like that's also good. And as we kind of opened up, it's like, yeah, you can be bulky enough to also feel tanky against those Pokemon, and you're still wall breaking as effectively, especially once you hit that like 160 power. So there we go, guys. The deepest dive into Kleavor to kind of make this an S-tier Pokemon that can handle a lot, and also prove that Fury Cutter is not a meme, and all those trash players mocking Fury Cutter and my Fury Cutter, like, theory crafting and stuff, they've always been wrong, and they're more so now than ever. But that just kind of, like, people that refuse to watch my content are deliberately making themselves worse at Pokemon and gaming, and it just doesn't make any sense, but that's society. Ignorance and being wrong is just more fun than the truth, and that's why everything sucks now. But hey, at least Kleavor doesn't suck, so hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.